Hi, this is Dr. Rich Schuttler again with lesson number 2 in Chapter 4, titled Field Test and Pilot Study Explanations. Here you will see all the different lessons that I have for you in Chapter 4. As I just mentioned, this is lesson number 2. What's going to follow after this lesson are going to be 5 different lessons on presenting qualitative data. Then I've got 3 other presentations for you on how to present quantitative data. Once I'm through with those, then I have 2 lessons to bring this lesson strategy to completion. One of them writing the introduction and conclusion sections for your chapter 4, and then a lesson about basically wrapping up this whole lesson plan. Now in this lesson, I'm going to give you some information about field tests and the explanations that you might want to consider putting into your Chapter 4. I'll also do the same with pilot study explanations. I'll give you examples and give you an idea or two about what type of information and how you might include that into your Chapter 4. Then I'll provide an example from one of my mentees who's gone on to graduate and how he put his pilot study together and how it was represented in Chapter 4. Of course, you can always go to ProQuest Dissertations and download a couple dissertations that were published by your university and get some great examples how others have also provided the same information that you're going to need to provide in your Chapter 4. Then I'll conclude this lesson strategy with a reflective summary of the salient points in this lesson. Now, field test explanations. Now, the field test explanations might be something similar to what you have in Chapter 3, although it's probably going to be a little bit different. Now, this is going to be dependent on the university that you are graduating from and their guidance. Oftentimes, a field test is done for qualitative research questions and interview questions before the proposal is submitted for university approval and IRB approval. If that's the case, then you may not have anything in your Chapter 4, but it's not uncommon that some universities want their students to have the IRB approval first and then do the field test. If that's the case where you're at and that's the process you have gone through, then in Chapter 4 you might want to consider how you're going to put that information together, and thus this lesson strategy. First, you want to describe what was proposed and what, if anything, was different in the process. Almost every student I've worked with over the last 14 years, there was some difference in what they proposed and what they actually done. It's not uncommon that in a field test, when you give experts the first draft of your interview questions, that an expert looks at them and believes that some of the wording should be changed, because that's why you're giving it to those experts in research, to make sure that the data you collect by doing the interviews will actually align with your research design. Let's say, for example, you had 6 open-ended questions in your information that you provided for your field test. And at the conclusion of it, you found that it's best to only have 5 because you received comments from the research experts suggesting that you may have had some duplication in one of the questions. So therefore, there was a change. Now in Chapter 4, you just want to allude to that, what was proposed and what's available now, if now being what you use to collect your data. Provide the qualifications of the field test subject matter experts and how many you used. With my mentees, I encourage them to have 3 to 5 subject matter experts who are qualified to teach classes at a university level in the same research method and design that my students are doing their dissertation in. For example, if somebody's doing a case study, I would encourage them to find 3 to 5 faculty who teach case study research. They are automatically experts because the university that they're teaching for has approved them to teach such a class. So therefore, they're qualified. The idea of having 3 to 5 helps to make sure that you get a few people who are experts and not just one. You want to be able to get a couple different perspectives. Remember, chances are you're only going to be interviewing about maybe 15 to 25 people, so 3 to 5 experts should be more than enough to help you with your field test. But you want to make sure in Chapter 4, if this is where you're providing this information on the field test, that you help the reader understand what the qualifications were of these subject matter experts and how many actually gave you feedback. Now, for subject matter experts, if not in Chapter 3, then how did you decide their qualifications? Again, I gave you my example that I asked my students to look for faculty who were approved to teach research courses. That's how they were decided they were qualified. You may have a different method. Perhaps you know people who do research, or you know people who have written textbooks on research, particularly in that area of the design that you're applying. Nothing wrong with that. There's many different ways to qualify people. We just want to know, how did you decide their qualifications? How did you find these subject matter experts? Did you have to run an ad in Google? Did you put something in Facebook? Or did you go to your university and ask them for faculty who teach courses so you could then go to them? Or perhaps you did a snowballing effect, and a snowball effect would be much like asking one faculty who teaches research and then asking that person if they know anybody else. For example, if you asked me if I knew anybody who teaches quantitative research, I would say, of course I do. I've been working at a couple different universities over the years, and I know a number of faculty who teach both quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. I would be able to refer people to you. And I'm sure your dissertation chair and committee members could do and would do the same. Now, I do encourage you not, and I'll repeat, not use your committee members for these subject matter experts. Even though they may be experts, you want to get third party, if you will, unbiased views of somebody who hasn't seen your work before. How many did you have to ask to secure those who helped you? As I indicated, you might want 3 to 5. I had one student who had to go through 8 different faculty to find 3 who would help her. So she wrote it basically like that. She indicated how she qualified them. She indicated, how did she find those subject matter experts? She lives in Canada. She actually went to a local university in her neighborhood, asked to speak with the department chair in research, and then the department chair in research gave her several names of people to go looking for and ask if they would help her. As I indicated, she had to ask quite a few to find the 3 that she was going to be able to use for her field test. Again, in Chapter 4, we just want to know what you did, how you did it, and why you did it. Now, in the field test, you want to provide the research questions and interview questions before the field test. If you're writing this information in Chapter 4, help us see and know what you had originally provided from that proposal, if you will. Then provide a narrative of feedback from the field test subject matter experts. Now, you don't have to go in every level of detail, but let us understand from your work what occurred and basically what happened from the feedback that those experts gave you. If every expert that you had in your field test indicated that question number 4 was not needed, or several of the questions needed to be rephrased, then just give the information much like I just said, of course, with a little bit more detail. You don't have to make this 20 pages long. Keep it concise. Keep it to the most important salient points. If a couple of them said just change a word here or there, perhaps an adjective or a certain noun, it's not necessarily you have to address everything. You may just indicate that, 2 subject matter experts provided several different minor changes, and those changes are found in the appendix that follows. Provide the rationale for what, if anything, was changed and revised. The rationale is normally what was provided to you by the experts. Again, also we want to know is what occurred and why it occurred. Provide the final research questions and interview questions in another appendix. So the first appendix in regards to the field test would be what you originally had. Then you would have the narrative of what occurred during the field test, and then you'd have another appendix with the final questions that you used to interview your survey population. Consider this like a movie that you play back and another will understand. Just help us understand again what happened in your field test so that we can get a sense of the step-by-step process you took, what occurred, and again, help us understand why things changed. This is what we call good research. It's something that other people need to know about because in case somebody wants to replicate your study, they'll see the value that your field test provided to you. And if you had a field test and the research experts had nothing for you to change, that's fine. And just all you have to do in that case is provide that appendix with the original information of the research questions and interview questions, then have a narrative indicating that there were no changes and therefore the original appendix remained as was provided to the subject matter experts and is the same that was provided for your interviews. Keep it simple, student. Remember, you don't have to go crazy on this, and what I mean by that is you don't have to go writing a lot. Just give us enough information. In some cases, even with edits that were required, maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs at the most. Just help us understand what happened during the field test and what was the outcome. Now, I'll talk a little bit about pilot study explanations. Now, pilot study is normally done after the IRB has approved your dissertation proposal. Now you're getting ready to start your data collection. Now, some people, even in qualitative work, will do a pilot study instead of a field test. There's different reasons and there's different explanations on why one would use a pilot study. More commonly, a pilot study is done with quantitative work for people to take a look at the questions that are provided in a Likert type survey to make sure that they're worded correctly. And these people are not research subject matter experts. They're actually people who are part of the survey population. They're content experts like everybody else who's going to fill out your survey. So it's a different type of review of your questions. A field test and a pilot study are 2 completely different processes. Same thing with a pilot study as with the field test. Explain the qualifications of the pilot study participants. So, for example, you may indicate what your survey population is and that perhaps maybe 5 or 10 people, however many you've chosen, were taken from that survey population and asked to be part of the pilot study. Explain how you identified the pilot study participants. For example, if I had 400 people in the survey population, I may want to take the 400 people and put them in a randomizer and let a computer generate which ones I should go to first. Or you may pick every 3rd person until you get the amount of people that you want. Whatever the process is, it should be logical, it should be random, and it should be as such that the people involved in your pilot study, as I mentioned before, are qualified to be in the pilot study, but also part of your survey population. Explain how you contacted the pilot study participants initially. Did you call them on the phone? Did you send them an email? We want to know how you originally reached out to them to ask them if they would be involved in your study in the sense of being part of the pilot study population. Explain how many were contacted and how many participated. Much like in the field test, if you happen to have contacted 15 to find 7 that would agree to do your work, then that's what we want to know. Again, we want to be able to know how you did your work and what problems perhaps or concerns you had. Perhaps some people just couldn't do the pilot or they didn't want to be part of the pilot. Maybe they didn't want to be part of your research at all. That's possible, and it happens on a regular basis. But we're looking at how your work could be used later, and if somebody's going to replicate your study, let's make sure they know everything that you did and why you did it and how you did it so that they'll be able to do their work even easier. Share directions you provide to the pilot study participants. You should have this scripted out and they all get the same information, much like a script for a qualitative interview. Provide everything that you gave in regards to directions to the people who you asked to be in the pilot study and the directions you gave them when they were in the pilot study, what to do with your survey. This helps us understand how they were approached and what guidance they were given, because when we look and see if there were any changes, it helps us to know exactly what you told those people. Again, if somebody in the future wants to replicate your study, it would be great if they had that script. Perhaps you sent it on an email to other people. Then just take that email, save it in a Word document, label it correctly, and put it in your proposal and or dissertation as an appendix. Explain any unusual discussions or concerns from those contacted to participate in the pilot study. Let's say, for example, you asked several people and they didn't want to get involved because they were afraid that if they did, they wouldn't be looked upon favorably. Well, that's good to know. And you want to write that in there. You don't want to put their names, but you may want to say, of the 20 people that were contacted to be part of the pilot study, 22% of them were not willing to provide help for fear of retribution if they were involved in this study or if it was found out that they were involved in the design or approval of the questions. Depending on who you're going to send your surveys to, may depend on their level of concern on being involved with you and your work. Again, these are common aspects in research, and it's fine. We address them and we continue on. And literally, that's what you're doing in Chapter 4, because if you've done your data collection, you're writing Chapter 4. I'm just trying to help you understand what the reviewers are looking for in regards to the field test and pilot test. We want to know everything that's possible for you to document, for us to know what you did, why you did it, and then also, as I mentioned, for those other people in the future who might look to your work and want to replicate it, or maybe at least replicate your approach. In the pilot study, provide the research questions and survey questions before the pilot study. Same as in the field test. You want to let the reader of your work see what you initially provided. Provide in a narrative of the feedback from the pilot study participants. Again, perhaps a paragraph, maybe two, help us understand what the overall outcome was. Perhaps you had 10 people involved in looking at your survey and they all reviewed your survey and they indicated that everything was fine. Well, great. Just write that up in a couple sentences. I can tell you in one of my surveys that I had 62 questions and I had 5 people do the review as part of the pilot study. Every one of them indicated that several of the questions had too much American slang. I was actually going to use this survey to people who have English as a second language, and they didn't necessarily understand American slang. And so you can see the value of doing a pilot study, because if you have questions that people can't understand, they may actually answer them in a way that provides data which is not accurate. And that's the last thing you want to do, is to collect data that's not going to be accurate, particularly when you have a chance to make sure that your survey population is going to be understood by everybody in that survey population. Provide the rationale for what, if anything, was changed and revised. As I mentioned in my example, I would give a little brief explanation about how the people who were involved in my pilot study each provide information, comments about American slang being in the questions, and therefore that was the rationale, and I changed the questions that they related to and then scanned all the other questions to make sure that they were written clearly so everybody would be able to understand. Provide the final research questions and survey questions, again, in the next appendix. As in my case, I had the questions which I originally gave to the pilot study as an appendix. Then I indicated what happened during the pilot study. Then I offered the next appendix with the revised outcome of that survey. Consider this also like a movie that you play back and others will understand. We want to make sure that the other people who look at your work will understand everything on how your pilot study was done, how each step was done, and the rationale for each step, then the outcome of that pilot study. And here, just like before, keep it simple, student. You don't have to go on to some laborious writing about how 6 people gave you inputs on 3 questions and 2 others on other questions. You don't have to go that level of detail. Just help us truly understand the big picture perspective of what happened in your pilot study and what was changed, and of course why. Now here's an example from one of my mentees. All the examples I provide are from prior mentees of mine. They were approved in most cases on their first pass through, a couple maybe on the second pass, but I've have a very good success rate with my students getting their work approved because of the level of detail they put into their work that I help them understand better to do so they get their approvals. Same thing I'm trying to help you with. Give you more details, give you more expectations that people have of your work so that you can meet and exceed those expectations. All my mentees whose work I used, whether it be in this lesson or all my lessons, have given me written consent to use their work. They own the copyright on it, and I've provided the names and information so in case you want to go into ProQuest and download the dissertations, you can also do that. Now, Dr. Joseph Hagee, his dissertation is published in 2013 at the University of Phoenix. Now, Dr. Joseph Hagee, his dissertation also won the Dissertation of the Year Award for quantitative dissertation. That's one of the reasons why I use his work. One, because it's detailed, and it's an award-winning dissertation. You're going to find a lot of great information in his dissertation. And his dissertation is titled Influence of Religion and Religiosity on Leadership Practices in the Workplace, a Quantitative Correlation Study. In his work under pilot test, he has this provided. A convenient sample consisted of 44 individuals was identified to participate in the pilot study. The sample included individuals and business contacts known to the researcher possessing similar attributes to participants targeted in the main study and working in the information technology, academia, and healthcare industries. You notice how he gave information about the convenience sample he used to get his pilot study participants. Over a 3-week period extending from May 6, 2012 through May 27, 2012, the subjects were asked to respond to surveys of this study. 35 complete responses were submitted. The results were analyzed to eliminate those answers that were deemed untruthful. 2 participants failed the lie test, 5.7%, resulting in a ballot sample size of 33, N equals 33, representing 7.8% of the study's sample size of 384, and whose characteristics match those of the survey population and sample. Again, as I indicated, people that are involved in a pilot study should be of the same qualifications as those who are going to actually do the research for you in regards to the survey. During pilot testing, a Cronbach alpha was computed for the LPI score with a value of 0.83. As shown in Table 13, for the 5 leadership practices dimensions, the Cronbach alpha ranged from 0.7 to 0.81. In the case of the URPI, the Cronbach alpha for the pilot testing phase 90 was 0.90, with the split half correlation value at 0.93. As a result, both LPI and the RPI instruments were considered psychometrically sound for the purpose of this study. Now, if you don't understand about the use of the Cronbach alpha, well, this is something that you might want to learn a little bit more about before you truly start writing your Chapter 4. And this is one of the reasons why Dr. Hagee probably won the dissertation of the year, because he adds so much value to his work. Now, he goes on and provides a table for the pilot test. And if you want more information, you can see the dissertation, because to provide all that here would be too much for this lesson, because you can find his dissertation online. To conclude this lesson, the reflective summary is that I provided you information about a field test and the explanations of how you might consider writing it up in your Chapter 4. Remember, a field test is designed for subject matter experts in the research design that you're applying to go through your questions and make sure the questions are written to produce information that's required for that research design. We ask questions differently for a case study as we do for a phenomenological design. Same thing with quantitative work. The questions are worded differently for a correlation design as it is for a causality design. Now, the pilot study is a little bit different. The pilot studies tend to be done after your IRB approval. They tend to be done more so with quantitative work, but some qualitative researchers will still use a pilot study where those people who are qualified in the survey population look at the questions to make sure from a subject matter point of view to that body of knowledge that you're doing your study about, have reviewed your questions and ensured that when other people like themselves get your survey, that they'll be able to truly answer the questions based on the wording that you're asking them about. Then I shared with you an example from Dr. Joseph Hagee. If you want to look at his dissertation, play back this lesson, go back to the slide where it has his name if you need to, and look also at the title of his dissertation. You'll find that in ProQuest Dissertations. The next lesson in this 12-part strategy of how to write your Chapter 4 will be providing information about qualitative data in part 1 of a 5-part series. And in that next lesson, I'm going to address the central research and interview questions, demographic questions, and themes or questions, and how you would consider writing your Chapter 4 if you have a qualitative study. One of my popular sayings is there's no such thing as writer's block. So if you believe you have writer's block, I'm sorry, that's not possible. That's just your own self-imposed bullshit, negative thinking, self-talk to allow yourself to be lazy. I know more than likely at this stage you're listening to this lesson strategy, you're working on your chapter 4. You don't have time to get delayed. You're excited. You just collected your data. You're getting ready to write about it, or you wrote about it, and you want to make sure your chapter 4 is as good as it can be. But if you're early in the program and you're listening to this lesson strategy so you can be better informed, so when you get here and have to write your chapter 4 that you'll do better, don't ever let yourself think that you have writer's block. If nothing else, sit down at your computer, start working on your own proposal or dissertation work, proofread it, and chances are within a few minutes you'll start getting excited about your work, and the next thing you know, an hour will go by because you'll get into it. I mean, after all, this is your passionate work that you're involved in. Don't let anybody ever talk to you about writer's block. And if you hear somebody else talking about it, stop them, because that's that negative self-talk entering in to tell them that they can't do it. And there's no reason for that. Chapter 4 should be simple to write. That's one of the reasons why I'm giving you this lesson strategy. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 were challenging. Once you get past that, chapter 4 is easy, and you know what? Chapter 5 is even easier. It gets easier as you get past your proposal. So with that in mind, I just want to say thank you for being part of this lesson strategy. If you found information here that's helpful, please don't hesitate to share this program with other people, your peers. And as you need to, this lesson's available to you 24/7. Just replay it anytime and learn, and then apply and do better and better. I wish you the best of success, and I look forward to giving you the next lesson strategy.